insights that she had never heard before. That I might be able to help her understand what's going on in the world. And she really, so, it was, I'm very conflicted about that first meeting because I didn't know whether I was being put up on a pedestal or whether I was being shown up as a fraud for coming to New York in the first place. But I think it really is, so it's a difficult position to be in, and I don't think she was comfortable being the mentor and being treated as though she liked to call herself a dictator trying to legislate herself out of existence. She did not think that, like this issue about Plowshare's actions and things like that, which only began happening a few months before she died, and there's no record of her saying anything about them. But she would never say that her opinion was the end. She could say, yeah, those don't appeal to me, but that wouldn't have been, therefore we don't do them. She did not put herself in that position, or if she did, she didn't like herself for doing it, and she tried to correct herself. So
So I actually recently got arrested, I think like 4 weeks ago, and I'm in the middle of legal stuff. I have trial August 16th. Me and another Catholic worker and Black Lives Matter group were arrested for sitting in the middle of traffic. And I know for me that experience was incredibly powerful, and I wasn't planning on getting arrested. I was saving my next arrest for a different action, and then I couldn't believe how many police officers showed up for a Black Lives Matter rally when there were only 16 of us. There were probably 20, 30 cop cars. Before we had even sat down, there was a helicopter. I mean, that was like as we were marching, and it was just, I'm like, now I have to get arrested. Like, this is
to do.
Oh my gosh!
It was in so much trouble.
Yeah, it was just like, it was so ridiculous, and I couldn't believe it, and I can't believe that people don't understand that the racism is so embedded into our police culture and just the culture that we have in America. And so doing that experience was really hard because a lot of the people of color there were really angry, and I, which is totally fine and warranted. And it was just a really interesting experience trying to be nonviolent in a group that felt a different way of like expressing anger. And no one was violent like when we were getting arrested, but I know there were like more violent words that were expressed. I wouldn't say violent, maybe like harsh words. But I did notice from like a lot of the people, from everyone when we got arrested, that people had a lot of anger and cursing and just like freaking out because then they realized that they had put themselves into a situation where they're arrested now. And it was really funny because this was the third time that I've been arrested, and it was so different from the other times because I was just like, whatever. And I mean, I was still angry. I've had to practice a lot. The first time I got arrested, I couldn't say anything to the police officers because I was livid. I started singing St. Francis's song. I couldn't talk to any of them. But this time was definitely much different, and I think it was really hard to be a peaceful person when so many people were so upset, and some people were expressing hurt, some people were just freaking out about their jobs and their positions, and I think I definitely felt like I had privilege as a Catholic worker because I have an entire community that's there supporting me.
Yeah.
I mean, my family, they're not okay with me getting arrested because I've got like a family of lawyers. So they're all like calling me up different times. But my family in Rochester is really supportive and there for me. Whether they agree with me or not to get arrested, they're still there for me. And that's my full-time job, so I don't have to worry about that as much. And I don't have a family of my own, so I think that in itself is kind of a privilege. One thing that I did see happen, which was really interesting, was some people were offered. Everyone was offered a plea bargain, and one person who was about 19 years old, her mother was like encouraging her to take it, and she felt a lot of pressure and ended up taking it. Then we had this entire discussion about it, and no one else was going to take one, and then someone else came up and took another plea bargain. And it's been really difficult because our leaders of the group were so upset, so hurt by this other person taking the plea bargain. And it was really interesting to see, like, that pain. I felt so bad about it because it's like people are living in fear, and not everyone is called to get arrested, but if you are going to, then you need to stand. I personally think that I need to stand with the cause, because if I take the plea bargain when people of the group, people of color who, have to have a battle every day, every second of every day, I felt hurt. I felt hurt for the people who were part of that. So it's been a tough experience. After being like thoroughly checked and having police officers like watch all of us as we're being like woman handled in my case. It took me a little bit of time to recover, which is like, my experience was nothing compared to what other people have to go through going into jail. So it's been a tough experience. We're looking at possibly facing 8 days for a violation, because they just want to punish us, I think, at this point. So, yeah, I'm going to talk for so long.
Thank you. Carl being here is reminding me of something that I heard Carl say once. I won't talk about everything I've heard you say, Carl, because some of them would be not appropriate here. But this idea, that Gandhi said, social betterment never comes from parliaments or pulpits, but from direct action in the streets. And I remember sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, Carl came to Davenport, Iowa, where I was living then, and we got him in the St. Ambrose College, talking to classes there. And he blew these kids away by telling them, I think it's like a worldview about how does change happen. And these kids, very idealistic, good kids, they wanted to change the world. They wanted to change the world by, they were going to get to be captains of industry, and they were going to be able to get into Congress. They're going to be able to get into church positions, and they're going to use their education and their privilege to get in these high places where they could bend low and condescend and beneficently help people down below. And Carl said, if you want to make a difference, get as marginal as you can. Make yourself as unemployable as somebody who can't fit in, unelectable, somebody who's never going to pass the review for ordination. Get yourself, because this is where this is how change for the good happens. Bad change happens from the top. So like Donald Trump can get elected and do a lot of damage. But when you talk to people who are in positions of power, I've talked to senators who will say, yeah, I know, but I can't do that. Because of having to deal with their donors and everything else. So really, as Phil Berrigan said it, to be free enough to go to jail, to get yourself out of those positions. And again, like I was trying to say with Arun Gandhi, I don't think that good comes from like getting some super NRA model peace movement that's going to just bulldoze everything through. It's going to be small communities, and when the good change happens, it usually is very, very difficult to trace where it came from and give anybody credit for it. But we're not doing this to get the credit. We're trying to save a world. Kathy has a comment.
I want to first double check if there's anybody among us who's under 40 who would like to respond to Paul's invitation to speak before I speak.
You're under 40.
So I think everybody feels fear, and whatever I know about courage, I suppose it's the ability to control our fears, and I don't think we should be guided by fear, but I do want to express an anxiety. You know, we're living in a time when clearly there's increasing militarization of local police. We're living in a time when, you know, as we speak to one another, the network for incarcerating people who've been picked up on immigration violations is just stunning. I mean, it's a new aspect of the prison industry, and lots of people are making a lot of money off of the extension of this new network that's available for incarcerating people. And again, I don't want to speak motivated by fear, but I do want to say that we have a common reason to seek solidarity, unification, bonding, and togetherness in light of the social factors that are changing in this country in terms of militarization. And, you know, believe me, I am appalled by and very motivated to object to the militarization that has crushed and torn apart and destroyed and wrecked societies elsewhere. But I think we've got to be increasingly aware of what's happening right here.
Yeah.
It does increase my anxiety, Chrissy, that, and I'm going to use the word jargon, but I feel like a pipsqueak. Okay, I am a pipsqueak. In terms of academia, I checked out and dialed out a long time ago. And nobody should have ever even given me a degree for whatever kind of piddle I was putting forth anyway. But I'm anxious that in the parlance of academia, there's been years and years and years of schooling people in the development of filters. Filters through which people emerge with a language that feasibly can separate people and feasibly can cause so much accusation that it gets to be difficult to overcome the separations. And so just at a time when I sense we need all hands on deck in solidarity to say, up with this, we will not put. At a time when the capacity to draw up lists and, you know, disappear people is becoming increasingly feasible. You know, just the I mean, General Dynamics works on the programs being used to pick up people and separate families and develop, I mean, the computer programs. So I think, I hope I'm being henny penny saying the sky is falling and that the sky isn't falling. I really, really hope that. But you know, we've seen what the United States has done in other countries as the military has run those shows. And now if the military, which has more money than anybody else, they can't even figure out how to spend all the money they're getting, as they now can increase their tentacles in you know, the neighborhoods across this country, I want to see us develop the language that can help build more unification, build more build more bridges rather than moats. So I think it's a challenge to all of us.
Yes.
Thank you. I've got a response under 40.
I'm going to play guilty as charged as idealistic, but
Yes.
I agree with you that we need solidarity, but we need solidarity in the police. We need police officers that are able to say, no, I won't do that, but we need people to be police officers. It's true with, I am an academic, and I am Canadian, and I wish to study in the US, so I'm worried not being arrested, you know, because I want to study in the US. So, yes, but I think as a maybe future teacher, I have something to learn to those, and I can build bridges to make in sort that, yes, I won't be in my soul, in my classroom, speaking alone about something that I am the only one to understand, and trying to reach other community in Canada, in the US, you know, starting to do something. So it's true, when you talk about the privilege of going to prison, it's something that a bit disturbs me, because like it or not, most of us, we are bourgeois, you know, and we have the chance of going to prison, and after going out, we're not the mother alone, you know, who goes to prison and who has drug problems, and so we are very lucky, and nobody wants to go to prison. So we need to have lawyers to get out, and we need to have people working in the prison who are aware of this. So, you know, it's what you said, it's really a food for thought, but I'm really, you know, a bit critical about I think maybe in the older generation of Catholic workers, maybe they're too much enthusiasm of going to prison. Sometimes I feel it's my opinion, but you know, sometimes it could be more reflected. But yeah.
Yeah, please, you said you had something to
I
say.
love the fact that he acknowledged it. I agree with him 100%. I believe there's more than one way to help the ones that need help. And I think we should have responsible people that want to make a change in all levels of society, all levels of who have an opportunity to make a decision, opportunity to make a real difference from the bottom, from the middle, and the top, if they all have the same vision or mindset. Because my understanding, when I first got involved with Catholic workers, it was like a fun game to go to jail. It was like playing house. When, from my perspective, I've always feared prison. I've always feared jail. I've done 3 years in prison for that, being a rebellious young man against society, against how I was treated. So from our perspective, there's nothing good about going to jail. And I would tell people, my fellow community workers at St. Joseph, I can't risk it. I will be treated differently. That's a fact of life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't have to try and prove it to them, make them understand that, but I would tell them openly, because they romanticize going to jail. If that's the way you want to do it, I have no objection whatsoever. To me, everyone has a choice. That's their choice. And I can't do that. But I understand why you want to do that, because I don't need to go to jail to understand how powers are treated less than. I lived it all my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I understand your motive. I understand it really. But I agree with my Canadian brother that it's other ways to do this. You do yours, we do ours, and let them do theirs. We all have the same objective, same motive, same reason to want to make a change. But I don't think it's just one way.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, see, I have needed to go to prison to learn some things that you already know, and I'm still learning, and I've got to go back to learn more. But you don't, that's where we're in very different situations by the facts of who we are. I think what I'm saying is not that everybody doesn't have to go to jail, but I think that we are poorer when, for example, I believe that this statement would have been very, very different if at least one person in that group had come with that experiment.
Brian, why don't you say what statement
Oh,
you're
the
referring
statement,
to?
the statement on racism and the Catholic worker
Lament.
lament, repent, repair that came out a few months ago. That some young Catholic workers put together about Catholic worker and racism, and it was, and I think for my part, people, it's been interpreted that I'm against that I object to that statement because I don't see racism in the Catholic worker, and that certainly isn't true. One of my objections is what Kathy was talking about. The language is one that's inaccessible. I don't have a master's degree in sociology. I cannot read that. I look at that and it's just jargon, and it grates, and it's not, you know, the first issue of the Catholic Worker said, this article, you know, this paper is intended for the unemployed person sitting on the park bench. And that's not who, you know, that was not in mind at this with the PhDs that were instrumental in putting this together. So we need to have we do need to have a mix, and people doing all kinds of different things. I'm just saying, I think our movement at this point in history, this very important point in history, that this is something that's about, you know, that this last plowshares, you know, Mark and Carmen are both 55 years old, and they're the youngest by far of the people doing this. 20 years ago, the people doing it, there would have been one person 55, and the rest would have been 20 and 30. You know, and I just think we need to have that.
I think one of the other methods, at least at our, actually I think it was at the humor discussion, that we talked about, as opposed to the big action with a line of civil disobedience or blocking traffic or one of those kind of things, that another thing Catholic workers have found very, very effective is the weekly witness, where people, for a certain cause, for at a certain place that's significant, go every week, and they banner, leaflet, whatever, stand, and they interact with the workers who are making death, or, you know, and then sometimes with their security guards, and with and they go again, and they go again. Not in a confronting thing, but like, this is our freedom of speech, this is where we're going to be, and speaking with signs or banners or face-to-face if there's foot traffic, or just being passed by cars, and starting conversations that way, building relationships, because the people see them, and they say, you know, oh gosh, you must be cold out there, you know, and it goes on and on and on. At the recruiting offices for the military, or at you know, one-on-one, being there, faithful, building those, putting those questions in people's mind, questioning the paradigm that way. You're doing people-to-people stuff without, and it's hard. You know, it's not very exciting. It takes a lot of dedication. But that's another way that you build these things. You do talk to, you know, if you're at the courthouse, then you talk to lawyers, you talk to policemen, you talk to, you know, and they get to see, well, you're not just crazy, you know, I don't know why you come here every week, but, you know, you're a person, you're a person, you know, you're, and I think, you know, that's another, in between just business as usual, doing hospitality, or going somewhere for a big deal and getting arrested.
Thank you. I just want to quote Peter Warren. We each have our vocation. The thing to do is answer that call. So everybody's going to do this differently, and that's part of the beauty of it. Is, you know, your vocation is not my vocation, and Kevin, we're both Catholic workers, but you know, and there's the diversity and the richness. And I wanted to speak a little bit to his point about, you know, different countries and different cultures. I had the great honor of living and working in Honduras, and I worked with the Human Rights Center there, and they did a lot of work in the jails and prisons. And, you know, we were able to go in quite a bit. We had a jewelry making cooperative, so we went in and gave workshops, and but mostly it's being present with people. But one of their big programs, and they called it the Prevención, the prevention program, was to work with police. At that point, it's not so now, but at that point, the police were not militarized. They have been since the coup in '09, and more importantly, the COs. And, you know, I was able to witness the incredible work of these people doing, you know, like sitting down, like, you know, here we call them sponsors, but the leaders of cell blocks, you know, and the COs to try and come together on some things, you know, to ask, you know, because you're a person of goodwill, I imagine that you can listen to this young man's reason for needing to be out of solitary. You know, we go to every cell of solitary confinement, you know, and the conditions there, I suppose you could imagine it, pretty horrific.
Yeah, I've been in prison in Honduras.
Oh, well, bless your heart. Maybe I visited you.
One thing I wanted to offer, I was, while I offered some criticism of the Poor People's Campaign, I wanted to offer some praise too, because one of the things that they did was have participants, you know, all of us, sing together. Mm-hmm. They had song leaders, not performers, but leaders, and very good ones in Albany. And we did sing together. And one of the antidotes to fear is singing together. One of the ways of achieving that elusive unity that, you know, we often lack in the peace movement is also singing together. So for that time together, we are unified and we are overcoming fear. And also had the opportunity once to speak with Vincent Hardin, which was really terrific. And he said in the early civil rights movement, we used to hold on to each other's hands to hold each other up because we were afraid, and we just kept singing because it helped us with fear. So you know, that really emphasized how important community song is for us. And I hope that we will embrace that more fully.
I think there's something about fear that's coming to mind as we're talking about this is, I guess I'm scared all the time. And I think we are in very perilous times. And we are all in great danger, and it doesn't matter. You know, am I in more danger because I travel to Afghanistan and go to a city where there's suicide bombings going on now on a regular basis? Am I really in more peril because of that than just being a human being on this planet? If I really believed that there was a place to go and a way of acting and behaving myself so that I would not need to fear the militarism of the state that Kathy's talking about, not need to fear what's coming upon us with climate change and impending nuclear war. If I thought there was a way that I could be safe, I really might grasp at that. But I don't think there is. I think we are all in danger. I just got back from Afghanistan on Tuesday, and I had the opportunity to be this close to, you know, you've heard about the peace walkers, maybe they were on the front page of the New York Times of all places, There's men who walk 400 miles from Helmand province to Kabul on a plea for peace. And they met with the Afghan peace volunteers who were hosting me, but they wanted to be very, very careful that they not be looked at as being controlled by foreign powers, and I guess I could be a foreign power. So I was just in the other room, and I was just really anxious. I heard all about it. It was a really great privilege to hear about these brave Afghan men from brave young Afghan men and women who had just met with them, and they were filled with enthusiasm about it. But these are guys who, totally simple, uneducated farmers and working people who just knew that the level of peril and danger, that their security level was at zero, that there is no hope except for some real radical change happening. Otherwise, there's no hope whatsoever. Their lives are done if they cannot do something dramatic and make some kind of change. And they walked this road without any support vehicles or any advance work with churches and things like that. There were no, but mosques and families took them in along the way. And these are roads that the U.S. military does not like to travel in armored vehicles. But they were walking, totally disarmed and vulnerable through that situation. And I don't think those men felt like they were in any more danger walking down that road than they were sitting in their homes. And that's kind of how I feel today, is I am in as much danger on my bucolic farm, milking the goats and pickling okra and doing all these great things that we do at home, that I'm not really in more danger than when I am walking in Kabul with a turban on and hoping nobody thinks I'm a foreigner, or when I'm in a prison cell, or when I'm standing in front of the White House and refusing to leave when the cops tell me to leave. Well, I'm scared in all those situations, but I'm scared all the time. So I just know that this is the antidote to fear. This is not. I do not believe I'm in any more danger by stepping out as I do, or that I deserve to be safer than these wonderful Afghan teenagers who have to face this stuff every day. When just a little short story, I'll stop. The day before I left Kabul, there was a suicide bombing at the airport, and I heard about it. I checked my Facebook, and somebody said, this is happening. You better tell people you're safe. Somebody knew that I'd be traveling soon, so other people would know that if they hear this on the news. So I just put I'm safe, and went to bed, slept on the floor next to a young man, maybe 19-year-old, Muhammad Khalid. And in the morning, I get on my Facebook and I check, and I've got like 80 people telling me that they're, like 200 people liked it or reacted with a little smiley face on or something, and like 80 people said things like, "I'm glad you're okay." And Khalid, who was sleeping on the floor next to me, said, "I'm glad you're safe." So I just looked at Khalid, "I'm glad you're safe too. You're too, because neither of us would be safe if the other wasn't safe." and that's something that we can just make gestures for solidarity to people who live in fear.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes, it's time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Done.
For my file.